Hey guys, welcome back to the Micah Young podcast, sponsored by Learning Christ Ministries. It's good to see you all. We hope you are very, very blessed beyond measure today. I'm Brandon. We're here once again with Micah. How are you doing today?
Doing good.
Doing good.
Trying to stay cool.
I feel like that's going to be the party line until about December around
it's
here.
Texas, and it has moved in with a vengeance.
It has. Yeah, it definitely has. We were joking earlier about the fact that, got up yesterday morning, walked outside, and it was, 85, and it felt like a cold front had come in, like an actual breeze.
Yeah, it's been good until today.
Well, we are so happy and just blessed that you guys are watching and listening. I want to remind you all that not only are we here on YouTube, but we're also going to be up on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. So be looking for the podcast very soon under Learning Christ. So we start every day, every one of these things with a question of the day. And it's funny, I was telling Micah that I neglected to write one for the day. And I was sitting here thinking, what would be a good one? And when it's 138 degrees in Texas, your mind wanders and you think, where would I like to be anywhere but here? And so no offense to all the Texans out there. We're native Texans. We love it here, but it is warm. And so the mind takes you to places with more temperate climate, maybe a beach or some type of nice little wooded area. So my question for Micah today is, if you could choose anywhere in the world, any hemisphere, any continent, that you would set up camp, live there for the rest of your days, except for here in Bristol, Texas, where would it be?
Wow.
And I'm not going to let you choose Texas because that's a layup. So it has to be somewhere else.
Oh, man. Oh, that is a tough question because there's so many factors involved. California is beautiful.
Yeah.
Oregon, places like that. I'm okay with the beach for a while.
For a while?
For a while, yeah. And but it would probably be, I want to say Wyoming, but I don't want to live anywhere that the oil in your truck freezes. So probably Colorado, somewhere in Colorado. I've always wanted, as a kid, I wanted to be a cowboy.
Yeah.
So probably on a ranch somewhere, working cows. That would be where the climate was consistent. Here it goes from -6 to 108. And obviously my first choice would be Texas, but
Sure.
Probably the hill country, but probably Colorado, somewhere where the climate wasn't as extreme.
Okay, I could certainly capitulate to that. I've always had kind of like this little dream about how cool it would be to live in Leadville, Colorado. I visited there, and I just love that little town.
It's a neat place.
It's fun. Yeah, it's interesting. Every one of these episodes, I feel like it's just a little bit more of a scratching the surface at. I know you don't consider yourself much of an enigma. In fact, probably quite the opposite. You've always been kind of like, this is who I am, you are what you get. But I feel like every one of these things, we peel back a little bit more of the onion. And so I'm sitting here thinking back to the first podcast, and we talked about, at an early age, you always just wanted to be a preacher. At age 6 on, that's what I want to do. And then, you just talking about, I always wanted to be a cowboy. So, it's interesting. I know people are thinking, wow, cowboy preachers, that's a heck of a combination. And they're probably thinking, what would that look like? Would it be somebody who sits around with an acoustic guitar and picks around? Well, it actually does.
Yeah.
So I love that. That's one of the things I love about getting to sit here and do this with you. Is just, I've known you goodness over 30 years, and though I know you well in a lot of different capacities, it's still an opportunity to learn more.
Well, it's interesting of the cowboy thing. Honestly, I don't know where the preacher thing came from. Whenever I got up there in the kindergarten and said that, it must have been there somewhere.
Yeah.
But at 5 years old is also when I got my first horse.
Oh.
And me and a girl lived down the street were playing out in my front yard, and this horse just starts walking down the middle of the street. And so we go out and catch it and get a 5-gallon bucket and jump up on it. And my mother looks out the window and freaks out. And we put an ad in the paper, and a week or so later, a guy said it was his horse. And by then, we'd fallen in love with it. And my dad went and bought it. And so I had it for a few years. But I always wanted to ride horses and work cattle and stuff like that. Yeah. But my dad always told me there wasn't any money in horses. And you're either very wealthy with horses or you're very poor with horses.
Yeah.
One of the two. But that's always been a a desire of mine. I've worked a couple of roundups with guys that had ranches, and
Yeah.
I just love that lifestyle.
Oh, it is interesting how what we're exposed to at a young age really kind of defines us. And we've had a lot of discussions about, a lot of the things that, as long as I've known you, you've had you've kind of had a love, for lack of a better term, hunting, fishing, those kind of things. And I feel like those are elements of my relationship with you that I have not taken advantage of, because when I say I was born in Texas, let me clarify. I was born in Dallas, in downtown. I went to school in Oak Cliff. I went to school in downtown. So, the furthest I ever went was my grandparents' farm. So that was just something we were never really exposed to. My cousins all hunted and fished, and, I stayed inside and watched movies with my grandparents. But I don't know. I think that's part of why I enjoy being out here. For those of you watching, we're actually here at his at Micah's ranch house, and it's just beautiful out here. And my wife and I will come out here sometimes and spend the night, and I just go drink my coffee at 5:30 in the morning because I want to know what a sunrise looks like. That's not behind skyscrapers.
Blessed place.
It really is a blessed place, and it plays right into the whole concept of what we're trying to do here. For those of you that are joining us for the first time, number one, welcome. And this podcast is really about getting to the heart of, I call it the heart of the matter, and that is, Christ being the head and how the body functions. And we see that in a lot of different facets. We've been talking about relationships, and we're actually going to continue. We talked about at the end of the last podcast, I kind of teased prematurely that we wanted to kind of jump into that time in the secret place spent with the Father, but we talked about it, and we really feel like there's some unfinished business with relationships that we're getting into today. So I appreciate you answering the question. I love the idea of Colorado seeing you as a cowboy. I guess there's a part of me that's always seen you as a cowboy, so that's not so far off. So I love it. All right, so like I said, if it's your first time joining us, what we do is we just take a few topics and I throw it out there, and you guys get to hear, a lot of years of experience in ministry from this special guy right here next to me, and get to hear his heart on some issues, and we kind of go back and forth, and that is not going to change today. So let's kick it off if you're ready. So in our last episode, we were talking about and discussing the body of Christ, what that looks like, the Christ being the head, and how that compares to the physical body. If the head's good, it tells the body what to do, and I love that picture. It's such a beautiful picture of how the body of Christ should function. And when it's not functioning properly, means Christ isn't in charge. Christ isn't at the head. But if we keep him there in his place, it's not even ours to dictate whose place that is. It was his from the foundations. But we can get in the way of that. We're the ones that can get in the way of that. And so if he's in charge, then we see the body functioning. But we are going to move into a little different area today, because if we're talking about relationship, I think, and we touched on it last time, but I think we would be remiss if we don't draw a clear distinction between relationship and religion, because they are two very different things. And that's something that has been kind of a hallmark of your teaching for a long time. And I still remember those. It's funny, I remember bits and pieces of sermons for years where you talked about these things, and that, how relevant, and so how they're still relevant even all these years later, and how fresh it was then. But I know that there's a lot of people who've never really even considered. They've gone to church their whole life. They love the Lord. They've done all the right things. And when you ask them about their relationship with Christ, their first word sometimes is religion. Well, I'm a religious person, and that always, for me, sometimes that kind of hurts my heart, because I feel like there's I don't want to use the word danger, but I'm going to. There's a danger in trading relationship for that word religion. So we're going to get into that. So the question that I want to start off with is, do you think the word religion is at all relevant in our life as Christ followers? Does that word have a place anywhere in this walk with Christ?
Okay. Well, I appreciate you guys being here today and tuning in, listening to us. It's always an honor to know that anybody wants to hear what we have to say. I'd like to make a statement, and then I'd like to give a backstory to that statement a little bit, to kind of further it out, and I think it'll answer that question. Religion perpetuates the illusion that adhering to the tenets of that religion is the way to know God. Mm-hmm. And that's an illusion. Mm-hmm. God has always wanted a personal, intimate relationship established in faith, not by what we can do. Mm. It goes all the way back to Abraham when he said, Abraham believed God and it was counted to him as righteousness. That's what it was. Yeah. There was that relationship, and he believed. This was before the law, this was before the tabernacle, this was before the temple, this was before the sacrifices, this was before anything. And because Abraham believed God, obeyed God, God said, you've been counted as righteous. But man always has wanted some means of accomplishing righteousness or accomplishing that relationship by his own effort. Yeah. It's an attempt at self-righteousness. It means that I do something to merit righteousness. I do something to be right. I do something to get God to like me. I do something to get God to want to whatever, bless me or whatever. Yeah. And that's the heart of self-righteousness, that I'm trying to establish this right relationship with God by something that I do, as opposed to just obeying and believing what God says.
That is, I don't mean to interrupt you, but that is such a different concept of self-righteousness than the world tells us. Right. You know, we hear this definition of self-righteousness, and like, in my mind, you know, if I try to think of it in secular terms, you know, I've always thought of self-righteousness as meaning, you know, like, this is my platform that I can stand on, and you know, and I'm right. So there are some similarities, but what you're really talking about, I mean, there's something a lot deeper than that. You're talking about literally that's us, you know, telling ourselves this is our own man-made, self-designed path to righteousness.
It is inherent in the flesh of man. I mean, you look at Cain and Abel. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was an attempt at self-righteousness. I believe that because of Abel's sacrifice, he knew something, he'd heard something, or he had seen or heard the story about how God declared Adam and Eve righteous from slaying an animal and covering it. Yeah. And so whenever they come to worship, I think, just maybe conjecture, and you can take it for what it's worth, I think Abel understood that's what God wanted. Mm. Cain was trying to get God to want what he had.
Oh, wow.
He was trying to get God to approve of something he had done in his own effort instead of responding to what God wanted. And God gave the law, the rules, the sacrifices, the offerings, all of that to show that man could not accomplish the righteousness that he needed to be in fellowship with God.
I do not want to in any way diminish or minimize that example, but you pretty clearly just laid out in the example of Cain and Abel the difference between relationship and religion.
Absolutely.
I mean, you know, that connection, and then that self-righteousness, that man-made thing, trying to elicit something from God. Like and there's an arrogance to that. Oh. I mean, there's a real arrogance.
Pride, you know, it's I did something to get God to do something. Now think about that. Who's really God? If I did something to get God to do something, I'm the God. He's the servant.
Absolutely. You're literally putting yourself above him.
Correct.
Wow.
And so God gives all of these laws and restrictions to say to man, okay, you want to know the standard for righteousness? Mm-hmm. Here it is. Well, there's no way man could ever keep that. And that was the point. Wow. The point was to expose man's helplessness to be righteous and to go back to obeying God, trusting God, believing God. So God comes and he instructs Moses to build the tabernacle. And when he finishes it, and you notice a repeating phrase in there, Moses did all that the Lord had commanded him to do. You see that phrase many, many times. Right. It wasn't just a good idea. He was responding to God.
Absolutely.
And when it was through, God filled it with his presence. in the Holy of Place. The Ark of the Covenant was there. The Shekinah glory of God was there. And then they had all these sacrifices and rituals to go through. They got to Canaan. David wanted to build a temple. God didn't let him. Solomon built the temple. When he built the temple, again, God filled it with his glory. And man kept going through all of these different rules and regulations. Now, here's the thing that's pointed out in here. Even though man kept all those rules and kept all those sacrifices and kept all those offerings exactly the way it was spelled out in Scripture, which I don't think anybody could ever do that, but as best they could, and then they make that offering, he still isn't ushered into the presence of God. The priest could go vicariously, but he still didn't have that relationship with God. And God was saying, I think, keep it all, obey it all, but it still doesn't warrant you an audience with the God. It doesn't free you from sin. It covers your sin, but it doesn't free you from it.
Wow. And that's an important distinction too.
Oh, absolutely.
Between those two things, there's a huge difference between those.
Absolutely.
Wow.
One, it's covered, you know it's there. The other is forgiven, moved from you as far as the east is from the west.
Yeah.
And forgotten.
That's what I want.
That's what I want.
That's what I want.
That's right. I want to live by that mindset that God says, I forget it. It means it doesn't even come into play in our relationship.
Yeah. So it's funny. I'm sitting here looking at that question, and you did such, I really appreciate, I love how you put in the answer, you put the biblical context, or put it to a biblical context. And it seems very simple to me, like when considering, well, is the word religion relevant? Well, yeah, it's relevant in as much as that we recognize that, God doesn't want any part of that stuff, that man-made stuff, because it's anything that gets in the way of that connection between us and Him.
Correct.
And
the posture with Him is receiving.
Yes.
Receiving what He has provided.
Yes.
And embracing that and walking in that.
Yeah.
And we see, the temple was destroyed, and then they're put in captivity by Babylon, and the Ark of the Covenant, which represented the presence of God, is lost. We still don't know where it is.
Yeah.
But then they got out of Babylon, and the first thing they wanted to do was build a temple. Again, there's that attempt at it. And so the older guys that saw Solomon's temple saw this temple, and they wept.
Yeah.
But God said, the glory in this temple will be bigger, better than the glory in Solomon's temple. But here's the thing about it. The glory of God never took up abode in that temple.
Oh, wow.
It never did. And for 520 years, they kept the ceremony, they kept the ritual, they kept the sacrifices, they kept the offerings. And for 520-something years, they continued to do that. Well, then the temple of God comes in the person of Jesus. And He is the complete expression of the glory of God.
Absolutely.
He is the fullest expression of the glory of God. And at age 12 or 14, he walks into this temple that God has said the glory will be greater than Solomon's temple, and realizes that now the glory, the fullness of God is here in Jesus.
Wow.
And he makes that word come true.
Yeah.
Because all this time they're going through these rituals, going through these ceremonies, and God's not there. Now, their reaction was typical to religion. They ain't buying this because it challenges their practices.
Sure.
It challenges their traditions.
Yeah.
Life challenged their tradition.
Wow. Isn't it amazing? Something you just said that I want to point to. You talked about, the minute the first thing they did was build another temple, Isn't that, I'm laughing because that just seems to be kind of like the modus operandi of what we do as believers sometimes. We get out of I'm going to just use a term here, and I'm a generic term. We get out of a toxic church situation, let's say, or a toxic relationship, and we find that we can't wait to pour ourselves right back into that same pattern because for whatever reason, maybe it's comfortable or it's all we know. And those are the things. Those things stand in the way of the fullness of the Holy Spirit, what He has for us, because we're so married to these ideals that we think are ways to get to the Father. Correct. Or to elicit that response.
Correct.
And
Jesus comes on the scene, and all He talks about is love God with all your heart and love one another. And
so
that flies
simple.
in the face of all this stuff. Wait a minute. Yeah. We're doing all this stuff.
Right.
And then they kill Him.
Yeah.
And the temple, the veil is ripped from top to bottom. Mm-hmm. Now, my understanding of that, and it still has a relevance to it, was that by rending the veil, God was saying the barrier, the flesh between God and man is now lifted. But I think it's more than that. I think when that veil tore in two, it exposed the emptiness of what was really going on, because God wasn't in there.
Oh, wow.
The glory of God wasn't in there.
Yeah.
The ark wasn't in there. Mm-hmm. And yet they were continuing with this practice all this time, thinking that's making them right with God and enjoying God's presence and His pleasure in our life. And we still are looking for those things that we can do to get God's pleasure and to get God's blessing.
Sure.
When He says, this is the works of God, that you believe me.
And just as a cautionary tale for anybody out there who may not be a believer, you can hear this. There's a lot of truth being spoken right now about this. Nobody except the Father, the Creator of the universe, the gracious, powerful, loving Father, can tear a veil open and expose that there's nothing of substance there, because it's not me. I'm not there.
Absolutely.
And He tears that veil away in our life.
Absolutely.
I love that picture.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And He shows us the emptiness of all these things we've tried to get His attention or get His pleasure whenever it's right here in the person of His Son.
Yeah. Wow. You think about, and I don't know, if you have not considered this, but you can consider it now. All the times, growing up, let's say you first had that hunger, you remember that hunger for the Lord, and you just wanted to tell people. You talked about it in episode 1. If you'd stand there long enough, I was going to tell you about Jesus,
Correct.
And all these years later, that's still really the point. Like, let me just share the love of the Father with you. Let me share you the life of Christ with you. And I think about how many times I've heard conversations and been party to them, and even had them myself in times when I really wasn't focused on Christ in my life, where my default to people who were looking and searching was just go to church, you'll be fine. Just go to the system and they'll answer it for you. Mm-hmm. And my heart, my intentions were not bad. But when I think about it now, like, there was something simpler that I could have said to him, man, how much Jesus loves you.
Absolutely.
And I probably could have saved them from, that experience of having to go through the ritual to try to fabricate something or try to elicit that response from God, because maybe they had been told their whole life that, hey, you have to do these things in order to get Him to talk to you. No, you got to shut up long enough to listen to Him, and He'll talk to you. That's awesome, man. Wow. Whew. That's
well, here's the thing too, you mentioned there, the absence of life will always be justified by correct doctrine, correct practice, correct name, or whatever, instead of acknowledging, I have lost the awareness of God's presence.
Oh, wow.
Or I don't have the awareness of God's presence. I've done everything they've told me to do. Mm-hmm. I've prayed the prayer, I've walked the aisle, I've joined the church, I've read my Bible, but and that's the core of life, is awareness.
Yeah.
I know I'm alive because I'm aware of my environment.
Right.
Somebody that goes to sleep, we say, he's dead to the world. What does that mean? That means he has no awareness of the environment around him.
Wow.
Well, spiritual life has awareness. And I am aware of God's presence. I'm aware of what he's doing. I'm aware of his voice. I'm aware of his workings. And if I lose that, then rather than acknowledge, well, God, I've lost that awareness, I fall back on, but I believe the correct thing. I'm part of the right church. I have the right name on the church, or something that religious that wants to replace that relationship when nothing replaces it.
No. Nothing.
Nothing replaces it.
Nothing can. No. That's wow. Awesome. That was a lot deeper than I thought we would go in. I'm glad we did, because there's so much about this topic, man. Just and Micah, it's interesting to me how many people really truly don't understand the difference between a relationship with Christ and the religion that those old commercials. This is not your father's Oldsmobile.
Right.
I think that is like a pivotal point. Like, I joke about that, but I feel like that was a real revelation of Christ for me in my life, when I realized this is not the religion of your grandfathers and your grandparents and your mom and dad. This is between me and you. And coming to terms with that is amazing, and there's so much grace to it, and it's terrifying, because now I'm accountable. Like, this is one-on-one. This is me and you. I love that. Okay, so we're gonna jump to the next question. That was very cool. Now, this is an interesting one, because I'm cheating a little bit, because I'm kind of digging into one of the things that I've always really loved about your teaching is that you've always used really, really cool object lessons. I mean, and when I say that, I'm looking right into the camera to tell you this guy has shot bows and arrow, like shot an arrow across the church into a target, not a live deer, but it was a stationary deer. I mean, there's always, I can remember so many times that you've used object lessons, and I love that, because like myself, so many people are visual learners, and being able to picture this. So I want to try to draw a picture here. Okay, so imagine we've got, and I guess now that I think about it in retrospect, I guess we could have had a whiteboard, but I didn't want to do that. Let's say we've got a chalkboard or a whiteboard up here, and you're standing in front of a group of people that have no idea, no foundation in any of this, have never really read the word, never been exposed to what a relationship with Christ is. All they know is churches exist, there's different religions, they all hate each other, they all call it God, but nobody understands why. I think that there are people who unfortunately do have kind of that limited scope of what God looks like. So if we had a board or whatever the object is, and on one side was religion and on one side was relationships, what would be the greatest differences between these two? Because we're going to talk about similarities too, if there are any, but what are the greatest differences just between, very simply, religion here, relationship here? What are the big differences?
Well, I think one of the biggest difference would be that first statement that I made. On one side, I have this paradigm that says, I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to walk this, I have to obey that, I have to participate in all of these things in order to get God to like me, in order to for God to bless me. And it's all, the theology may be solid, it's not,
right.
And I have no issue with much of the theology in the religious system. My concern is the practice of it.
And that's an important point. I'm glad you said that, because it's very important. It's very important for our listeners to understand. In no way are we challenging theology. What we are taking on is the practice of when we take that from theory into practice.
Correct.
When it becomes talking about a practical walk with Christ.
Right.
What does that look like? Okay.
Yeah. This on this side, I mean, the theology would say Christ is head of the church.
Yeah.
But in practice, there are other things that come into play. There are other factors that come into play. On this side, where there's the church, all it knows is the life of Christ.
Yeah.
And all it knows is the headship of Christ. And all it knows is developing that relationship. What it does know is that whoever is there is completely and absolutely accepted by the Father. There's not a single thing he can do to improve his relationship. There's not a single thing he can do to diminish that relationship, because that relationship was established by the head. And the life in the head was imparted to this member of that body. And it's a body. It's not, the church in Acts 2 was birthed. It wasn't organized. It was birthed by the life of Christ being imparted into each person that was there. Right. It was the infancy stage. And the purpose, what it's to grow into, is the fullness of the stature of Christ. Over here, we are trying our best to imitate Christ. You know, we'll just throw it out there.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
the concept of what would Jesus do
Oh, yeah.
indicates a couple of things. Number one, it indicates that I can do what Jesus did on my own ability and my own power. Over here, it says, Jesus, what do you want to do?
Oh, wow.
It comes from a relationship with him.
Oh, that's interesting.
To speak to me, to let me know what he wants to do.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things as I don't know how far you want to get into talking about the relationship part of
It's
it.
your show, man.
But,
Literally.
but in Corinthians, he says, when he's talking about the relationship, he says, you formerly worshipped dumb idols. Okay? Dumb idols don't mean they're not smart. It doesn't mean they're deaf. It means they can't speak. Okay, well, how do you worship a dumb idol? Well, he can't tell you what he wants.
Right.
So you have to just conclude, well, this is what he wants. He wants a virgin. Because if we don't give him a virgin, he's going to rain hail on us. What does he want? He wants me to do this. He wants that. And it's kind of a crapshoot. And if we don't do it ourselves, then we assign people, like Israel did. We don't want to talk to God. You go to God and come back and tell us what he wants.
Yeah.
And we'll do that. This side says, I'm in relationship with the head.
Yeah.
I can hear him.
I can hear him.
He is not a dumb idol.
Right.
He is a
Wow.
God that speaks. And you even look in the Old Testament, time and time and time and time again, he says, if you will obey my voice, if you will obey my voice, precludes hearing his voice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Knowing what he wants to say in that relationship.
He's a God who listens too.
He's a God who listens.
That's what the cool thing is. Wow, while you were describing that picture, there's something really powerful about that, because on one hand, like, it's literally, something inanimate and something uber animate. I mean, it really is.
Yeah.
That's so
It's
cool.
death
What a
and
cool
life,
picture.
And
that's it.
And he says here, on this side, okay, you prayed the prayer, and I'm not saying that nobody that ever prayed a sinner's prayer didn't get saved. I'm just saying that there's a tendency to make that a form instead of encountering. There comes a point where you just have to kick people back to the Lord. I mean, they're coming in and won't know how.
What
to
a great place to be kicked to, though.
I'm saying, I remember a little girl we had in Duncan one time, and she was really struggling with her salvation. She would come talk to me, and my response was, "What God say?" Well, I don't know. I said, well, "Go back." I mean, she went back 4 or 5 times to just be alone with the Lord. And one day she came in, and God had revealed himself to her.
Yeah.
And it was a revelation, and it was a quickening, a new birth in her, rather than just a change of belief and conforming to an external standard.
I love that idea. Just kick them back to the Lord.
Yeah, just, you're going to have to encounter the Lord.
But it's so, wow. I feel like we say this every single episode, and I feel like we've said it in a lot of conversations over the year. It's just so simple.
Oh, God.
I mean, and I'm not trying to minimize this topic, because this is a serious topic. I mean, religion versus, these are things that people are concerned about. I mean, these are conversations that have happened as long as churches have been constructed, out of whatever, wood or brick and mortar. But the fact is that we've just overcomplicated something that was literally the simplest thing ever. Absolutely. It was just between a creator and his creation. And anything that we do, and I can speak from experience. I've done I've put in a lot of man hours putting things between me and God in my life, and now looking back on the other side of that, and I just find myself in this simple place. I just want more of him. Yeah. I just want to hear his voice, because I know that I can. And that's that confidence. That's not that world's view of self-righteous or self-confidence. That's that God confidence, that knowing if I will commune with him, if I will get alone with him, I know that he's going to speak to me, because that's what he does. Because he's good on his word. He says I will, and I can hear him, and he listens to me because he says he will.
That's correct.
And it's just
the New Testament says you've been deceived and you've been robbed of the simplicity and purity of devotion to Christ. The Old Testament says Abraham believed God and it was counted to him as righteous.
Yeah.
And then David comes along and says the sacrifices of God are a broken and contrite spirit. Micah comes along and he says, what do I bring God?
What do I bring him?
What can I bring God?
Yeah.
Do I bring him bulls? Do I bring him sacrifices? Do I bring him 1,000 rams? Do I bring him 10,000 rivers of oil? And do I bring him my firstborn? Do I sacrifice my firstborn?
Yeah.
And God says, this is what the Lord's required of you, to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly before your God.
That's
it
it.
doesn't get any more complex than that.
That's it.
All this other stuff is an illusion. It gives the impression, it may give the emotion. We've been led to believe that this emotion or this feeling or this whatever is God.
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is, it doesn't play out in relationship with Him.
It reminds me, I was just thinking about that song, that Christmas song that we've all sung as children, The Little Drummer Boy. And I always love that line, not because I'm a drummer, but because I love that line where, I have no gift to bring, to lay before a king. And that humility in that posture, that is the gift. It's the humility and the gratitude. That is the greatest gift that we can bring. Wow.
And learning to get to the point in our relationship with the Lord, because honestly, it's grace, and which means there's nothing I can do to add to it, and we think that's too good to be true, and it is too good to be true in our mindset, but it is true, and learning to allow God to wean that religious mindset out of us is a process. And He's always showing us. We never get to the point that we're absolutely free of it, but He's gracious in revealing things to us to just walk with Him, enjoy Him.
That's so good. That's so good. I do want to go to another topic. So we had originally talked about I was going to ask you about, this term, what is the religious system? But I really feel like you've answered it. I feel like you have drawn a very clear distinction between what is man constructed and what God intended. And I think that that's really a great definition. That's the clear distinction between them. Because the last two questions I have for you are really the heart of this, or really the meat. So here's the next one. And this is really a tough one for me, because I know that in the past, I know I've been asked this question, and I haven't always answered right. And that it bothers me now looking back, that I wish, I guess, kind of those regrets. I wish I could have answered better. I wish I would have been in a place. But, like you said, God is so gracious to forgive. But we encounter non-believers all the time, even in the big shocking statement, even in churches, we encounter people that have never had a revelation of Christ.
Correct.
And so if someone with no foundation in the Word, no experience with no revelation of Christ, no experience with the Father, came up to you and said, man, Micah, 30 years you've been talking about relationships. Why do I want any part of this relationship stuff? And you had the opportunity to answer that. What would you tell them?
That's a good question. I think what has dawned on me is, I'll give you the big view. There was before time, in eternity, there were only four things that existed: God the Father, God the Son, God the Spirit, and a relationship between those three. They had a relationship of love. They had a relationship of intimacy, and the description for that is they were holy. They were complete. Never in a million years did they say, let's start a religion. What they said was, let's create man in our image, after our likeness, and let him rule. Let's create someone that can participate in what we already have. That's this relationship among us. What I would say to someone is, first of all, God's probably not like you think He is.
Ooh,
Maybe that's what's kept you from Him all along,
Yeah.
is you have this image of Him.
Sure.
And second of all, He loves you more than you can ever imagine. And His heart is relationship, because only in relationship can you be made whole. Only that hole in your heart that can only be filled by knowing him. That emptiness that you experience can only be complete as you know him. And as you know him deeper, because he has everything I need. And it's through relationship that he imparts that to me, to make me whole, to make me complete, to make me holy. It doesn't make me a part of the Godhead, but it makes me have a relationship with the Godhead.
Absolutely.
Where he provides grace and peace and joy and all of those things that bring fulfillment into my life. And his heart is for us to be joyful.
Yeah, absolutely.
From that relationship.
Yeah.
And we've made that relationship so burdensome, or we've said the relationship is so burdened. When it's full of joy, to
Absolutely.
enjoy the Lord. I wish I could remember there was a particular catechism, and it says basically the chief end of man is to glorify God and to enjoy him forever.
Ooh.
Wow.
Yeah,
I got the
that kinda
first
gave me
part.
chills.
That's been laid on me. You got to do this and this and this and
Right,
glorify
sure.
God. But the second part is enjoy him.
Enjoy him, yeah.
Forever.
Yeah.
And he wants me to enjoy him.
Absolutely.
Because when I enjoy him, he imparts joy, and the joy of the Lord is my strength to face
Yes.
what I have to face in earth.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it goes back to he just wants to bless you.
Wow. I was it just reminds me of so many times, even as I was a kid, I remember, sitting in the pews of my grandparents' church and hearing the pastor, because at that church, a small town in Louisiana, the pastor would lead singing, and you get up there and clap, and the joy of the Lord is my strength, and everybody looked miserable, and I never understood, why do I want any part of this?
Absolutely.
Why do I want any part of this? But years later, now realizing, that, man, it's so much more than this misconception that we have of who God is. Right. I'm so glad that that's the way you answer that, because I think that's so telling. We have so many influences our whole life, and these constructs that we make for ourselves, or we allow other people to kind of define for us what that relationship
Right.
is supposed to look like, and we do that as well, even in the body of Christ, in our local church. Right. We allow people to shape for us what that relationship is supposed to look like. And at the end of the day, man, it's one-on-one. And how much it breaks my heart to think, and I know we talked about this like in episode 2, but it breaks my heart to think of all the good that's done in churches, of the damage that can be done too whenever the focus is off of Christ being the head and pushing the agenda, or pushing this is what, this is, you better get in line because this is what God looks like. Well,
not so much.
Not so much, and how many people miss out.
Well, I think one of the
fullness,
biggest things that I try to communicate to people, a couple of things. One is God is not mad at you.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
The wrath of God has been completed in Christ.
Yes.
He is not mad at you.
Yeah.
He's not holding a grudge
Absolutely.
against you. As a matter of fact, he has already forgiven you for everything you've ever done and everything you're going to do.
Yeah.
It's not a matter of making it up
Right.
or a matter of doing penance. It's a matter of just accepting what he's done for you. And so that posture that well, I've got to do this, or God wouldn't take me. I mean, we all have those images that we talked about, my dad being gone a lot. I still struggle with the fallacy that God's not here.
Oh, wow.
My dad was gone a lot. He
Sure.
wasn't there in situations. We
Sure.
went through hurricanes and he wasn't even there.
Yeah.
So now that's carried over into the Father, and learning to believe he is here. He
Yes.
is never gone, and
Right.
he's here to bring grace to me in every situation.
Yeah. There's such a huge difference between God's absence and God's silence.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Boy, how many times have I lashed out at God in my life when things were tough, and I said, "Where have you gone? You've left me." And there is a biblical historical precedent that he knows how to be quiet and never leave his people.
That is correct.
Give us the guidance we need. That's so cool. All right, so the last one is this is an interesting one, and because of the word satisfy. So a lot of people want I think it's fair to say, if you would agree, I think people ultimately, if you ask them what do they want in a relationship, they want a relationship that will satisfy them. I don't want to enter a friendship with somebody that's going to be miserable all the time. I don't want to go spend time with people. Let's just be real. We don't want to spend time with people that we don't have like interests with. Right. We want a mutual satisfying relationship. I mean, from friendship to, even when you see it in case studies of kids, they put them in a sandbox. They're going to gravitate to the kids, with the toys that they can get something out of, even at that base level. But I am so excited to ask you this question. What is the most satisfying element of your relationship with Christ for you? I know. And again, this is your podcast. You can talk as long as you want. So,
this is a simple answer.
Good.
I had an old red pickup truck, and I was doing a lot of hunting down in South Texas.
Yeah.
And I was on my way home. Now, I've been hunting, for a week, out in the woods, not doing anything religious, not doing anything. I mean, I'm enjoying the guys I'm with. I'm enjoying being out there. Yeah. And I'm enjoying the Lord. You got a lot of time in deer stands and stuff. So it wasn't like I'd been teaching at a conference or I'd been preaching at another church or, on a mission trip or something like that. But I'm driving down the road, and I think I was probably almost to Waco coming home from South Texas. And it's clear, and this will probably get a lot of challenges to it, but that's all right. You weren't there. One of the clearest things I've ever felt like I heard from the Lord was he said, I enjoy hanging out with you.
Oh, wow.
I just wept.
Oh, yeah.
God, you like being with me.
Yeah.
Even when I'm not doing religious stuff, you like being with me
all the things, yeah.
And that, he has reminded me of that time and time again when I think, like you say, he's not here, he's changed his mind, had enough of you, Jack, but that, when he said to me, I enjoy being with you, he didn't say I like everything you do. He didn't say there's not room for improvement.
Yeah.
He didn't say, but what he didn't say is I'm not going to like being with you till you get it all together.
Yeah.
Or I'm not going to like you if you're down here hunting, But he said, I enjoy being with you.
Yeah.
And that absolutely helped my understanding of his intimate love for me.
He can't get enough of you.
He
mean,
really does like me.
He does. I mean, that's what a revelation that is in and of itself. Because, we've talked before, and this is an important concept that we will be getting into much later down the road. But how do we love others if we don't love ourselves? Well, that's not where it starts. I can't love me until I realize how much he loves me.
That's correct.
And the fact that the reason for my existence is so he can spend time with me. I mean, right. Literally. I mean, that was the point of creation.
That's right. And it plays out. We talked about this. Remember that church life is just Christ life lived horizontally. Well, until I am convinced that he likes being with me and loves me and accepts me, then my focus is going to be trying to get people to like being with me.
Ooh.
Which means I'm going to change my behavior to fit the situation.
Oh, easy now. You're stepping on some toes. You see.
So if I'm not convinced of his acceptance and love for me, then number one, I can't impart that to others because I'm looking to get that from others.
So much time wasted in changing our behaviors.
Absolutely. Absolutely, to fit in.
Yeah.
To fit in and try to get people to like me. Whenever the whole is, I don't have that awareness of his liking me, his loving me.
Yeah.
And that brings fulfillment.
Absolutely.
And then I have something to give in a relationship.
Yeah.
And I'm not like Joni says, this sucky hole that wants to get have to get from everybody.
Absolutely.
And that's what destroys relationships.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's disappointing. You know, if I don't have this expectation,
That's it.
then
That's
I'm not
the
going to
word.
be disappointed.
That's the word I was hoping you were going to use, because the only way you can ever disappoint me is if I put an expectation
That's
on you.
exactly right.
That's on me.
That's right.
And what we want to do in relationships is, especially at the as interpersonal as it gets, especially family relationships, a lot of times I'm just going to use you as an example.
Sure.
I want to project on you why I'm dissatisfied.
Mm-hmm.
I had an expectation on you that was unfair.
That's correct.
One, because you're human. Two, one, because you're not God. Two, because you're human. And three, I never communicated how I was feeling. You know, it's that difference between, expectation and expectancy we have for the Father. I learned a long time ago, oh boy, be careful about putting expectations on the Father, because they're not realistic. They're not, but expectancy, I know he's going to move. I know he's going to answer prayers. I know he's going to heal. I know he's not going to leave. I know that he's going to talk. I know he's going to be quiet, because he does it all.
That's
because he's all encompassing. But if I start having expectations on him and by proxy,
Defining those expectations.
defining what those things are. Oh,
Well, see,
it's
then
disappointment.
we draw conclusions.
Yeah.
When he doesn't, well, you don't love me.
Ooh.
You know, if you really
Yeah.
love me, you would fulfill my expectation.
If you then,
Here's
if
the
you
test,
then,
you know. And so then it goes back to the other side. I'm going to do this in order to get you, and there we are again, back in that mindset.
Wow.
And the thing about it is, anytime I lose, and I can't, if I've ever encountered God and I have a relationship with Him and He lives inside of me, I cannot kill the life inside of me.
Ooh.
But I can become so numb to it by giving myself to external things,
Yes.
external people,
Yeah.
external expectations, external behavior, that I literally become numb to His promptings, to His quickenings, to His awareness. And so whenever I'm focused on the outside, and we'll probably get into this later on, the way Jesus lived is He focused on the inside and gazed on the outside.
Ooh.
His focus was the Father. His gaze was working we experience can impart the Father in people. He didn't take his cues from people.
No.
He took his cues from the Father.
That's it.
So when we lose the focus of inside of His presence,
Yeah.
then I begin to focus on you. Fix it. Do what I need you to do to make me comfortable.
Yeah.
Fulfill my expectations. And God, in His wisdom, will never allow that happen.
Yeah.
He never will allow another person to take His place.
And here's the thing, too, and this is important. If I stop taking cues from the Father and I start taking them from you, that's on me. That's
correct.
That's not on you. And I think that's an important distinction to make, because we want to cast blame, especially in relationships in the body of Christ. This is my business here, and if that's not aligned, there's no, we talk about this right angle. If this isn't right, this is never good. My perspective of you, it cannot be healthy, because this is unhealthy.
Right.
So it's important to remember that. Wow.
Well, the adverse is true too. Not only one aspect of it is I will expect you to fulfill it,
Yeah.
and then the other aspect of it is I will manipulate you to fulfill it.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as always, this has been more than I bargained for, and a lot.
Very good.
A lot. Yeah. Wow. This is. I'm sitting here looking at the run sheet, and I just, I just don't think we're done with relationships as a whole yet. We're never done with relationships,
Right.
and that's the beauty thing. That's the beauty of it being organic. But I do want I just want to tell you how much I enjoy these talks, because that's really what they are, man. I just get to sit here and hear your heart. And you guys out there listening, and those of you listening on your podcast platform, you're getting a little glimpse, just a few episodes in, of the life that we've shared together for a long time, and I'm excited to keep it going. So thank you guys so much. You want to say bye to
Appreciate it.
everybody
Thank you
before
so
we
much
close
for
it?
being here.
Yeah. And so that's it. That's episode 4. We thank you so much for joining us for the Learning Christ podcast. Be looking for it very soon. More episodes coming on Spotify and right here on the YouTube channel. So as we sign off, just a reminder, go be the hands and feet of Jesus today. Probably change somebody's life. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.